There's a grim prediction coming from a top group advising U.S. health officials. The National Academics of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine says that four late-stage coronavirus vaccine trials, four of them backed by the United States, could fail to provide positive results. So Dr. Neeta Ogden is an internal medicine specialist and immunologist in New Jersey and joins us now to talk more about this. So Doctor, I know that there has been a push on a number of different fronts to develop a vaccine. Hearing that four of them may not make the cut sounds like a lot to me, but maybe this is just part of the process. Why does this group say that these trials could fall through?
Well, good morning, Anne-Marie. And I'm really glad that you couched it in that kind of language because that's exactly what's going on here. We're not really speaking to the exact vaccine trials that are going on in the United States right now. In fact, this is from the journal Biostatistics that historically these kinds of trials of infectious diseases for vaccines, 33% of them succeed. So there is only a 33% success rate. And that really explains that kind of language that, the Operation Warp Speed is expected to support 7 phase 3 trials. Well, out of those 7, we naturally expect 4 to not come out with positive results, to essentially fail. So I think it's really important that the message here isn't, 4 vaccines that are currently being investigated have terrible data and are going to fail. It's sort of the natural evolution of vaccines and how, we've observed them in the past. I think it's important to know, though, that we're in a very different era of vaccine development right now. We have sort of a historic use of modern technology. The mRNA vaccine has never even been produced before. So I do think that there's, just like a novel coronavirus, there's a lot of novel technology happening here, and that may sort of defy the statistic. But it is important for the National Academy of Sciences to maintain realistic expectations as we, move ahead with the vaccines.
So, we've heard a lot about how, this vaccine is going to be available quicker than any other vaccine has ever been available. Then we heard from the FDA basically saying, hey, if it looks like it could do more good than harm, then perhaps we could look into distributing the vaccine before the third phase trials are through. It makes people nervous. So now we hear from Dr. Anthony Fauci, and he said that, there is a legitimate way to end coronavirus trials early. Explain that to me. How would that work?
Well, we've seen this even in the study of drugs. When there's overwhelming positive evidence that something's working, studies can often end early, and that whatever entity it is, it could be a vaccine or a drug, goes into emergency use earlier because it shows that it's going to save lives that much sooner. Now, the big thing with what Dr. Fauci was talking about is that independent review of that data would be essential. So there would have to be the data safety and monitoring board for those vaccine trials. The scientists involved with those vaccine trials, they first make that call. And again, we're trying to get away from this idea that the FDA or the government is stepping in too early and politicizing vaccine data. So we do want what he's talking about, independent review of vaccine data, so before we get it to a place where we use it in the public, or even before or at the same time as, the FDA is reviewing this data. Why? Because we really want transparency, have all, the data points been checked. Is this safe and effective? The danger of stopping a vaccine trial too early is, are you looking at too small of a population so that it shows a lot of success, but then you missed a great proportion of people where it may not have been as successful? Also, do you miss side effects? And are you then, affecting the safety data? And this all speaks to what we're hearing a lot about is the public skepticism over, not just vaccines, but their faith in, this distrust now that's happening with the FDA, largely because of things being approved too early. And so I think Dr. Fauci makes a really good point that if we have many independent review steps along the way, we could get to that point where a vaccine is approved early if the data is very, very good and robust.
So, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine also laid out a federal plan for distributing a vaccine in the U.S. if a vaccine is approved for use in the public. So, what would that plan look like, and how long would it take for, if not the entire American population, to be vaccinated? I suppose enough of us so that we don't have to worry about COVID-19.
Yeah, I think this is a good draft proposal addressing the federal allocation of the vaccine once it becomes available. And to be honest, I think it's going to take a while because it's 4 phases. The first phase is really addressing those people we know who are at most risk, which is the frontline healthcare workers, as well as people with underlying illnesses that can lead to higher morbidity and mortality, and older people who live in congregated settings like nursing homes. Then there's a second phase where you have more essential workers like teachers or people who work in factories that we need society to sort of run smoothly, as well as prisoners and homeless shelters. And then third, we're talking about young adults and children. I mean, frankly, I haven't even heard of any studies of these vaccines in children yet. I think maybe the Oxford vaccine is starting one. So that's a kind of a question mark, especially as we go back to school. Like, how are we addressing this large population of what we're increasingly seeing as asymptomatic spreaders? And then the fourth phase is sort of everyone else. So there are a lot of people to get to before it's the entire U.S. population. And I think it could take some time because, it's going to take a lot of time to scale up that vaccine and produce enough of it for everybody.
Yeah, and it's not just that. We've talked about this before, though. It's just, people feeling confident about the process. I think it might take longer to get people to come around than it would, to sort of vaccinate enough people. It's going to be a long road, I think. Dr. Neeta Ogden, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.